Are we on? Thank you. Any other time?
7:31.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'll open up the regular scheduled meeting of the Planning Commission for Tuesday, September 14th at 7:31. Can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Fitzer? Here. Mr. Cusero?
Here.
Mr. McHale? Mr. Nushai? Mr. Pernick?
Here.
Ms. Redmond?
Here.
Mr. Sanaki?
Here.
Mr. Watson?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we do have a quorum. Agenda item number 4 is approval of the regular minutes from August of 2021. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from August 4th, 2021.
August 24th.
August 24th, 2021.
Anybody support that?
Support.
Motion support. Anybody have any changes, corrections, anything that they see that they don't like about it? Seeing none, I'll take roll call, please.
Mr. Cusero?
Yes.
Mr. Pernick?
Yes.
Ms. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Sanaki?
Yes.
Mr. Watson?
Yes.
And Mr. Fitzer?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Agenda item number 5 is public discussion, items not on the agenda. Is there anyone from the public wishing to address us? Or Ken, is there anybody online that raising their hand or anything?
I don't think there's anyone online at this point that would like to speak, Mr. Chair. Unless Joan would like to speak.
If she's not raising her hand, probably.
Nope. I don't think that's her.
Okay, then seeing no comment for public discussion, I will close public discussion. And we'll move on to agenda item number 6, which is consideration of the site plan approval for 655 South Main Street.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
The first item on our agenda is a site plan review for 655 South Main. You may remember this property. We've seen it before you a few months ago. It is on the east side of South Main Street between Gladwin and Bowman. I've included the zoning of the subject property is BRD1, which is consistent with the parcels to the north, the south, and across Main Street to the west. And then surrounding that, the parcels are zoned R2 single-family residential. An aerial view. The site is just under an acre, about 3/4 of an acre, and developed with a 7,300 square foot building. It was formerly an American Legion Hall, currently used as a church. The site does have access from Main Street coming in and then exiting north onto Gladwin. And then I think I have one more. Everything's frozen. So I'll just let you look at that aerial, take it all in, and then eventually my screen, I think, will let me advance to the next slide when it's ready. There we go. Zoomed in a little bit more. Now, the proposal before you is to modify the facade of the church. The place of worship is operating and has placed a temporary sign in the parking lot. There is also a 100 square foot shed proposed behind the existing building. So you can see in the chart, we have an indication of the development standards, what's required, what's provided, and then whether the items are compliant or non-conforming. We have a couple non-conformities with respect to setbacks. Those are the front yard and the rear yard. those are existing conditions of the building that's been there. So we thought it was helpful in our letter to highlight the nonconformities. One of the challenges that we often have when we have existing sites that have been built over time and ordinances that come and go is how do we bring a site up into compliance? That's really our goal when we do site plan review. When we have new projects that come in, we'd like to try to bring them up to as much into compliance as we can with the current ordinances. But sometimes we struggle a little bit with the scale of the project and then the scale of what we're going to require compliance with. So we did a little bit of an analysis here. Building setbacks, as I said, those are non-compliant. At this point, they are pretty much what they are, and there's really no changes being proposed to that. And so that's an example of a non-conformity that should just be accepted the way that it is. With respect to parking lot islands and the greenbelt, we don't have either one of those on the site, although a few years ago, staff worked with the applicant to put trees in the right-of-way to sort of create more of a greenbelt appearance. We note that one of those trees, the rest of them seem okay, one of them does seem like it's in poor health, and we would recommend that that one be replaced if it doesn't survive. Rooftop screening is another area of non-compliance. The Planning Commission may speak with the applicant about that rooftop screening, what their intent might be, and that may be a condition that you consider. And then lighting, the mounting height. So the mounting angle of the existing fixtures does have some impacts on the neighboring properties, and we think that there's a way that that can be fixed to make that site more compliant. But again, you can speak to the applicant about that as we go ahead. Just kind of a summary of the parking and parking layout. 43 spaces are required, 58 are provided. Parking landscape, I just kind of touched on that. We also recommended some changes for traffic signage and striping interior to the property, just to give people better directions on how to navigate through the site. That might be something that you could defer to staff or to consultants to ensure compliance with that. With respect to landscaping, there's really not a lot on this site, as you could see from the aerial, or if you saw in person if you drove by. It is fairly limited. There's a planter box in the recessed entryway. There are those 6 trees, again, that I mentioned that were planted in the grass strip, and you'll find those on the landscape plan also. There is, I guess, one small area in the northwest-most parking space. We will be seeing some additional landscape there with some shrubs. And then some planter boxes proposed in the raised concrete islands in the center of the parking lot. So essentially, some of the newer standards that we require in terms of parking lot landscaping, landscape end islands, we're not able to accommodate that with this current plan. The applicant is trying to make some move towards that with respect to their planters that they are proposing, and you can speak with them in addition about that and whether you find that to be sufficient. In terms of the design guidelines, we've indicated those here. Some of the things to consider with respect to the design as you look at the facade proposal that is compatible with the surrounding properties. Use of similar materials on all the facades where feasible, although in this case we're only affecting the west facade, so we're not necessarily considering the whole building. Again, noting rooftop equipment and color elevation renderings are required, and we hadn't have that when we sent out the review letter to you. With also respect to the interior signage that we recommend for the vehicles, we also recommend some parking lot striping for pedestrians to alert both people where to go and also to alert cars, drivers, that they know where to go on the site, or they can be alert to the fact that there might be people crossing. And we just note with respect to a trash enclosure that the applicant is proposing curbside pickup, so that's really not necessary. I think, this should say lighting at the top. So this was with respect to the lighting. The existing poles are mounted higher than what's required or what's permitted. We have a maximum of 20 feet high. These are existing fixtures. They're proposed at 25. They're also not mounted at a cutoff angle, and so there is some overflow of the lighting. And so we recommend that you discuss this with the applicant, removal of the fourth fixture, which faces the adjacent residential area, adding shields on those residential sides, and then turning off or dimming those fixtures after 11 o'clock, or some combination of that. So we can discuss that with the applicant and come to some agreement on making sure that we're not having light trespass on the residential properties. And then we know there's really nothing of note to say with respect to sustainability, but I think it's a couple of good things to highlight. Reusing existing buildings and parking areas, we think that's a really good thing, and we like to see that. We just really encourage the applicant to seek out other green and recycled materials as part of the construction and site furnishing phases of the development. So going forward, we'd like to see more of that. And I think that, we've got just a couple of aerial views to give you a refresher on what that looks like, and I think that is the last one. Yeah. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have of me, and I believe the applicant is here. Okay.
Questions for you, please. I had the prints blown up for them. I got the 1117 size. These are dated in 2019, the first two prints. The last print here was dated for 21. Am I looking at blueprints that are a couple years old?
It could be just the portions of them of those that were updated for.
I don't see any current dates on the first two drawings that we have. It looked like to me that they could have been just.
I believe what we were looking for was with respect to the lighting and the landscaping.
Okay.
So I don't know that they've made changes to the other sheets.
Yeah, that's dated as of this year. Also in our packet, I'm used to seeing a letter from AEW, our engineering department, and the fire department, and I saw nothing of that. Are they been looking at this building? Are they aware of what's going on?
They are, and I am not aware that they had any issues with it, and I don't know if Nick has heard anything or if Joan has heard anything.
Well, the engineering department reviewed it when it came up in 2019, so we didn't ask them to do it again because there are no parking lot changes.
Okay, I'm just used to seeing a letter from them in the packet. If I could, anybody else have any questions at this point?
Not for Jill.
Okay.
I'd like to make a slight statement here just to get people up to speed as what's going on. I did a lot of research on this lately. I've been looking at old videos and what's going on around town. And I had an old piece of paper that I saved from 2018, talking about the Church of Clawson. The church bought the building in 2014. And in 2016, the PC approved an amended site plan, work to be completed by May of 2017. Well, I went back and looked at the video of the PC meeting on June 9th of 2015, so we're quite a ways back. Sitting in this chair as chair was Bob Blanchett. Scott Watson, you were on the Planning Commission at that time. And Jim Elvis, who's no longer with us. John Kingsip was our attorney. He's no longer here. Vidya Krishna was our planner. All these people have changed over the years. So we've got a new team of people here, and I'm sure, Scott, you're aware. You've seen the building over the years. You know what's going on with it. Mm-hmm. And I'm just saying for the new people here, you've probably seen the building and what state of disrepair it's in right now. But you have to understand this has been going on since 2015. I don't recall when we put a stop work order on it because the front's torn off now. And you can't just tear the front of your building off and not be able to replace it. We revised things. We tried in May of 21. They were supposed to come into us for a site plan approval. They requested postponement at that time. I requested at the next meeting, and they didn't show at that time. So here we are today. We finally made it here today, and we're going to either approve or disapprove a site plan for a building. If anybody has any questions about the background, it was an old building to begin with. It hasn't been a site plan approval to the old building before the church moved in, so it's been neglected by the city for quite some time now. In a way, I think it's the city's fault that we dropped the ball. Over this many years, from 2014 to now, something should have been done. Something should have been looked at a little bit closer, as far as I'm concerned. So that brings us up to speed. That's where we're at today. So if we can carry on now, we'll look at what he's offering, what he's going to propose, and we'll have to vote on it. So I just wanted everybody else to know, you and I have seen it, but most of the people that have been through this haven't been up to speed on it.
If I may, Greg?
Sure, Joan?
When we asked the applicant to come back in with his revised plans, this was all looked at by planning, and he was told that what he needed to provide in order to come to Planning Commission and be prepared was to revise wording that was on the plans that you noted earlier have different dates on them because they were submitted, they didn't go forward, they were submitted again. So there were 2 sheets for parking, and there were 2 different sheets in the planning packet, and they were asked to revise the wording so that both of those sheets matched. They did that. So the plan now is correct. They were asked to supply a lighting plan and photometric plan, which they did. And those were the things that they were asked to submit in order to have their plan complete.
Joan, can I ask you to elaborate? When you say plans were submitted and then nothing was done, what do you mean by nothing was done?
Well, I can't say that nothing was done. They submitted plans. They then started work. There was a stop work order, and they've had plans that have been created by a couple different architects over time. And they did not have money to move forward at first. Then they revised their plans, which that was one of the second sets because they revised it. They were told they did not have to completely redo the parking lot, which was part of the very first plan they submitted. So yeah, there've been a couple different revisions, and now we have a complete set that is up to date.
Thank you.
Satisfied? Any other questions, or would the applicant like to?
I have a question based upon the overhead views and the site plan.
Yep.
I can't remember, and it doesn't show up too well in the PDF that I have. Are there any trees in the city's right-of-way at this point in time?
Here, you want to take a look at this?
5, I believe.
Yes.
So you've
And they
got
don't show up on
a tree here,
this view either.
4 trees here.
I think there's,
Very small.
I think there's 6
Not when this
trees,
picture's
5 in
taken
front of the
either.
parking lot and 1 in front of the building.
And those trees are planted on the city right of way. And
Correct.
Okay.
I assume they were installed and paid for by the city of Clausen.
By the grant that was, yes, given to the city to plant trees.
Yeah, the city gets a grant every year, and when we haphazardly space them, you just
Yeah, I-
received them.
Yep,
Okay.
Susie Steck called me. Yeah, Susie Steck called me.
You should probably introduce yourself. so
A few years
everybody
ago.
knows.
Sorry, Pastor Bob Morrissey, the church at Clausen. So Susie Steck called me a few years ago. I know she no longer works for the city. We were working on at that time, what we were going to do with the green belt. So, I mean, I guess can I try to give you a 2-minute rundown of what you've been discussing? So before we bought the building, the church, I knew very little about building and zoning, although I knew there was a little bit that went in. So I called the city before we put an offer, and the city transferred me to Vidya, who used to work for a consultant for the city. And I asked if a church could go there, right? Like if that was allowed. That's about what I knew. And she said yes. So I said, great, we're good to go. So we put an offer on the building, got the building. I started the church from scratch. There was a group where the Middle Eastern Bible Fellowship meets on 14 Mile. There used to be a church that was located there, and they had shrunk to about 7 or 8 people. And so their pastor fought in Vietnam and contacted Agent Orange at the time. And so I was a young guy trying to start a church, And I came in contact with them. They sold their building to the Middle Eastern Bible Fellowship. We were renting space from the United Methodist Clawson Church. And while we did that, while I was starting a church, I worked more than full time and didn't take a dime from the church to try to save all the money we could, which is what we used to put a down payment on what was formerly the American Legion Hall. So, man, I thought, oh, great, church can be in here. And 2 weeks after we bought it, we just did a bunch of cleaning inside to try to get rid of cigarette and smoke smell and beer smell all over the building. And we just started meeting. And I didn't know anything about that. And then a couple months later, Jim Albus came in and said, what are you doing? And I said, what do you mean? What are we doing? We're talking about God in here and praying and having church. And he said, you can't do that. You don't have a building permit. And I said, what do we got to do to get one of those, right? So we ran through the process, and then he said, you got to go through site planning committee. So they gave us a temporary order, and we put almost all the money that we had just to get an architect to draw stuff up, right? You're talking my family and 10 old people, 70s, 80s, all living on, Social Security here in the city of Clawson. Some of them we still provide meals for and help them do projects and around their house and that type of stuff. So we've slowly grown over the years. But once we got that site plan review, I was like, sweet. And then we priced out, and just the parking lot rehaul on that thing was going to cost $250,000. Almost as much as we paid for the building itself. And I was like, we're in over our head. Like, I don't know what we're going to do. We're going to have to sell the building. What are we going to do? And so we began to work with the city slowly. I had meetings with Mark Pollock, John Kingsep, Susie Steck, and I'm in rooms with those guys and just trying to figure out what we can do slowly over time. What about this? Well, let us go check on this. What about this? Back and forth. So that's kind of what has led us here today. I don't know if you have any questions about what we're currently proposing or laid out that I could try to answer for you.
And do you currently own the building?
We do.
You own the building outright?
No, there's a, when we, with the American Legion Hall, it was a land contract for 5 years.
Okay.
Before that 5 years was up, we worked with the Oklahoma Baptist Foundation, who we now have a loan with, also called Water's Edge Advisors, if you care to look that up online. But that's who our loan is through. So since we've been there, we've put a new roof on the building, old as can be. We've had to do concrete work because it was leaking from the parking lot into the building. It was the old pool hall room in the hall. It's where our kids meet for church. And our church hosts the Boy Scouts are meeting in our church building right now. Girl Scouts meeting there. Cub Scouts want to meet in our building. And we're just trying to make a difference in the community. So.
I noticed that it seemed like you changed the name. It sounded like you started out as Tri-Country Baptist Church, and now you changed to the Church of Clawson.
Yeah, we started as the Tri-County Baptist Church, and now it's the Church at Clawson. We wanted to identify with the city, so that's what we decided to do.
Okay, so you're aware of, you're looking at the site plan here, there's a list of items that have to be done on that building.
Correct.
Do you think you have the capability of doing that?
Yeah, we're in a lot better position than we were 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, we were, like I said, it was my family and 5 or 6 older people. Church has grown to about an average on Sunday morning of 60 people and about 80 members. And I really, we have, hopefully no one's listening, we got all the stone for the building. It's already purchased and paid for and is currently sitting behind the building. So all the stone veneer it's sitting on our property right now in the alley behind the building. We have, the church has about $13,000 set aside currently, and we're working currently with Water's Edge Advisors, Oklahoma Baptist Foundation, on the rest of the money that would be needed to finish
the rest of the facade of the building. And if I have a friend who's helped us quite a bit, who pastors a church in Shelby Township, and their church is substantially larger than ours. And he says, if you don't get that loan, then we're going to co-sign for you so you can knock this out. So,
So you've got the material. Do you have the monies that it's going to take to actually install it on the outside of the building?
we have building contractor friends who run professional businesses who are coming to donate time. We also partner with the Southern Baptist Convention, the largest Protestant denomination in the world, and they have several organizations. That's what they do full time. They come in and help church, what we call church plants, new church starts like ours, to do building projects.
We have in the past phased some projects, and I can see it, if we vote to approve this to go ahead, I can see this as a phased unit. My concern is I'd like to see the outside of the building look good. It's an eyesore right now.
It is, it's bad. We know it is.
We put a stop
We hate
work
it.
order on you, so you can't do anything. And when a stop work order is issued, I think it's not only for outside work, I believe it's for inside work. And you had a dumpster in your lot there Friday for one day, and then it went away, so.
I had no idea about inside or outside work. I didn't know we couldn't paint or, put up drywall or tear out old stuff that was left from the, left.
I would have thought that stop work order would state exactly what it is, that means stop work until you get an approval.
I'm sorry, I did not
Well,
know.
I understand that you're sorry, but the thing is,
True.
Sure.
we've been looking at this eyesore for 7 years. And you've used the term a couple of times, I didn't know, but isn't it contingent upon the business owner to understand these things going in? I mean, what's to make us believe that you're going to do what you've been telling us for the last 7 years? You're going to do it now.
Sure. So I would say I don't know that you have that guarantee, right? I'm like being straight up honest with you, except for the fact that we've poured $40,000 over time into architect funds, and we are committed to the city of Clawson through helping the people here, and we want the city to look like it ought to look. And we understand that it's a prime piece of property for the city sitting on Main Street. And the fact that we have $17,000 worth of stone already behind the building that we've invested to make it look better. Plus, not only do we want it to look better for the city, we want it to look better for us. We believe that it's super important to our survival, right? So if our inside is nice and our outside is nice, people don't know what the building looks like because on the outside it looks bad. So it hurts the church not to get it done as well. And so we're not interested in just freeloading off some old building and saying, well, let's make the city look bad by trying to do something to the church. I understand your concerns, and I would be frustrated if I sit where you sit. As a business owner, I understand that's how we're looked at by the city, but we lived off of the free will tithes and offerings of a downturned economy off of senior citizens. And I mean, it would have been nice when I called up if somebody would have walked me through. We probably wouldn't have bought it, probably. I'm glad we did. I think it's where we're supposed to be. And I think in the long run, it's going to be, we will do far more for the city than the city could ever do for us. I think the Boy Scouts would tell you that, the Cub Scouts, the Girl Scouts, the multiple people that we've bought meals for and provided for all during the pandemic, thousands of dollars to help people right here in the city have groceries. So we're committed to being here, and we know the sooner we get this done, that's going to be better. It's going to be better for me personally. I work full-time outside of the church. I take a small bit of income from the church to save up money so we can get this project done. But once this project is done on the outside of the building, we believe that people will come in the door. So for me, I'm going more people that come in the door, more, just be plain and blunt, more offerings coming in, the sooner I can stop killing myself of working multiple jobs and I can focus on the church. So, I don't know if that
I can
answers it.
see your dilemma, and I think you can see ours at the same time. There's a good-sized chunk of valuable property, and believe me, if you weren't a church, we wouldn't have been this nice over the years. Any other business that would have moved into that place would have heard from us back in 2016. We'd be shutting them down, moving them out. So I think you've got a lot of leeway with this.
Absolutely.
My concern is that if you have the capability of actually completing this project.
So you're talking phases of doing it, right? So, from what I understand from the rules of the requirements for remodeling a building and then just driving up and down Main Street every day like I do, basically you're talking about the front facade of Main Street, right? The rest, so if you're talking phases, the front facade would be immediately what we could go after with the stone being inserted and then windows. So we have all the stone, and now you're basically just talking the windows, and we have $13,000 set aside, not in our paying our bills, but $13,000 set aside in a building fund to pay for windows. So now you're just talking a few $1,000s for the hardy board.
Now,
So
once that's
you're
done,
using generalities, I'm sorry.
Generalities,
I'm
I
not using a good word either. Time frame wise, what are you talking about? Like, hey, so how
Yes.
long have you had the bricks?
We've had the stone for a year.
For a year. So what do you think realistically, time frame wise, you can have those bricks up on the building and windows complete in the building?
I would like to see it before the snow flies.
You'd like to
December?
see it, but is that feasible?
December? I think December's feasible.
Things that people would like and what actually happens in reality are often two different things. We went through this with Atomic Chicken. Remember, he promised us everything, and look at the building now. It's in no better condition now than it was years ago. It's a vacant building.
Can we pull up what the non-compliances are again? I'm wondering if Jill can pull those up, because were there
Jill, you
non-compliances?
have a list of those?
I thought that the non-compliances were just the lighting.
Yeah.
It's in your letter as well, on
Yeah.
page 3.
Yeah, I don't have my computer. I'm
Oh.
just wondering, sorry.
All right.
I can dig for it. But Jill, you said it was lighting and a tree, is that correct?
Yep, hold on.
There's a list of 10 items here on the last page 8, page 7 and 8. There's a lot to be done on this building. I mean, my preference is yes, fix up the facade, make it look good, but once you get that done, the parking lot's got problems. It has to be restriped, it has to be, engineering has to look at the plumbing out there, signage has to be put up, it's gonna cost you more money to do that, and I'd be somewhat pleased if we fixed up the outside, make the building look good from the outside in a stage 1, and then stage 2, move on to the parking lot, clean that up, and then 3 or 4 stages. I'm trying to buy you time, is
Yes.
what I'm trying to do.
No, I appreciate it. I'd be grateful to give us a stage and a time frame to say, we need you to get the building done by, and then we know what we need to do. Then parking lot by X date, right? So if we phase that out, that would be great.
So if we gave you a time frame and you didn't live up to it again, what do you think the consequences should be?
That's a good question. I don't know what the normal consequences would be in a situation like
Greg
this.
just kind of went through it. I mean, we would just say you can't continue to have your business there until these things are done.
Sure.
That would be the normal procedure from when we've done that to other businesses.
In other cases, you've been here years ago and went through the bond issue. If somebody has a problem with it, we demand a bond from them so that they don't do the work. We take the money, we do the work, we fix it up. Now, I don't want to hold them to a bond unless we have to, but I mean.
What are you guys specifically calling them that they need to do? I'm just wondering, is it just the facade and the windows in the parking lot, or are there things that are
The
on?
whole building has a lot of problems, but the facade, to me, is the major thing, the looks of it.
Well, so he's addressing the facade, and I'm just trying to wrap my head around, if we're gonna hold him accountable for something within a timeline, I'm wondering what we're holding him accountable for and what that timeline might be, because in terms of non-conforming, facade's not on there, windows aren't on there, parking lot, they need stripes, but they didn't talk about the condition of the parking lot necessarily. So I'm just trying to get an understanding, if we're gonna go that route, what that might be and what the timeline might be. What encourages him to actually hold him accountable for those things when they're not necessarily nonconformities, right?
Well, there actually is. So there's a list of criteria. It starts on page 7. There's 10 things listed on there that are talking about areas that right now are not conforming, criteria that he needs to have done to get site approval.
Now, if we did what we normally do, we would say, someone would make a motion that we approve your site plan on the condition that you take care of these 10 items. That's a lot of work, and there's a lot of money involved there, and I don't think you're capable of doing that in a timely manner, so someone's got to make a motion.
Well, but I don't see how what we've discussed here is what these 10 items are necessarily. I mean, maybe I'm missing something, but there's not windows on here. Jill, can you, I mean, when we talk about parking, you're talking about striping and making signage for pedestrians, correct, or no? That's kind of easier implemented than repaving a parking lot. And I know the parking lot is in disarray, and I agree that it needs to be repaved, but that's not necessarily spelled out here.
Right, so what they are really seeking to do right now is the facade improvement. And it was really the project. But all of the process, I'm trying to collect the information over the years, is to really determine what's the condition, what does the use require in terms of parking, how is it deficient, and then how can we bring it up to current standards. So that's where we tried to set out the existing nonconformities, just so that you could see what those are, because now we understand that they really are, with respect to the building setback, which isn't going to change, with respect to the parking lot islands and green belt. They did have the trees that they did in 2017. They're not super large, so you may not have they may not have impressed upon you that they're there, but there's one that's not doing well, so that one should be replaced. So that's a condition that we would recommend. It doesn't seem likely that the green belt would be something they could comply with, just given the constraints of the existing build-out, the layout of the building is there, or the parking lot is there. Unless we ask them to remove some of the parking lot, that would be difficult to comply with. So where can we find that middle ground where we have some additional green space, which we've done. The city did that through trees back in 2017. Rooftop screening, that seems like a reasonable thing that could be asked as part of the facade enhancement, to also screen that rooftop screening. It's not terribly an exorbitant amount to do that. I think a portion of it is, and so to continue that screening. And then the lighting, the height of the fixtures, and the directions that those are going. And so that's something that we can work with them on in terms of what needs to be lowered. If you, in the planning commission, can also say they're too high and they're non-compliant because they're shining in the neighbors' properties, and then either replace them or at least have the fixtures lowered.
And have neighbors actually, have we had complaints about lighting, or?
I am not aware of it, but that was something that we noticed on the photometric plan.
Okay, because there's a 5-foot difference,
Yeah,
right? Okay.
right. I'll just let me just, and then you go after, just because I'm on a roll. So we're going to talk about the parking lot layout. So with that, there are parking lot end islands that would be required, but again, the parking lot's existing. With this particular project, we're not expanding or really changing much about the parking lot, so does it make sense to remove spaces to add in islands? Maybe not, consistent with this project. But are there some of the other things that they were doing with respect to the planters, that might be more satisfactory? But then we did think that some of the parking lot directional signage and then that pedestrian striping in that one area would be useful. So those were sort of and those were highlighted in our letter in the green text. We do want to see the color elevations, the color renderings. That could be something that either the planning commission, if you feel like you need more information, that you could postpone and ask for that to be submitted, or you could be more clear in your guidance if you were to make a motion to approve that condition might be a certain color palette, and leave that up to planning to make that determination that it
Joe,
would
when
be
you're talking about
consistent.
color elevation, are you talking about the stone also?
Yes.
Because
Yeah, so the
he's telling us he already
rendering-
has it, so isn't that kind of a moot point?
Well, you may find it to be so, and you may waive that requirement if you feel like it's not necessary.
Okay.
And I think that's it. We got the lighting, so yeah.
While you're on that, could you reiterate for me in that particular district, what are color requirements?
I
know in the Downtown Development Authority, from my recollection, they have a strategy and a color rendering and a types of things, but in this B1 district,
don't
what's the
believe, I
colors?
will look for you shortly, but I don't believe we have any specific colors that
We do not.
prohibit. Thank you, Joan.
So then,
I love having that voice
what
in.
would a color rendering, what would a color rendering
What we would look
execute?
for would be to do a couple of things. One, make sure that we don't see things that are contrasty in a way that's not aesthetically pleasing. But also so that you know what you're approving, and that when you see it out and it's completed, that you know that that is consistent with what you were expecting to see. If you choose to waive that standard, that's completely within your purview.
So the stone, I assume, is a natural
Well, that
stone?
would be,
Then I'll let you
could we
go
ask
back
the applicant to
Yes.
describe what the stone is? And then maybe we put in a contingency that before you perhaps do a painting of a block wall, that we figure out. I'm a little foggy on this particular scenario. If there's no requirements, then how do we determine what is acceptable? Because that gets into more, for instance, personal preference, you know. My neighbors might not like it if I paint my front of my house lime green, but I don't think in our district that there's anything that says that I have to have the color blue, gray, and white as a criteria, at least from my understanding. That was why I was asking color rendering. I would think that it would be very beneficial that if we looked at the stone that they have, and then give them some guidance on what might apply in that area, maybe keeping them away from the lime green color, and maybe something that would look at the whole overall current strategy on the South Main Street there and say, you know, if you're gonna pick some colors, here's some recommendations that
Fit with the
would
downtown?
enhance that, you
Yes,
know.
you can do that.
But
I could have brought in a sample of the stone that we have and a sample of the hardy board that we're looking at. I can do that for you.
I'm guessing that, with respect to that you haven't shown lime green and pink.
Correct.
And so it's probably gonna be an okay scenario, but I guess, who would you bring it to, you know? I don't know that anybody in the
Quite
planning
often-
commission without a criteria.
Quite often, businesses will come in here with, you know, samples of the aluminum, the brickwork, they'll show us color samples, trim, materials, how it's done. That's happened quite often over the years.
And I do believe that there is something to the downtown district that we want it to be like, right? We want it to look like the buildings and be for lack of better words, conforming to the aesthetics of the downtown. And if we're working with a natural stone and a natural brick, which most of downtown is, I would assume, although I don't want to assume, that it would be more conforming than not. And I do have to say, in terms of investing and reinvesting into Clausen, from what you speak of, I find that we can't compare you to a laundromat or any other downtown business that might let their building go in disarray. And thanks for contributing and investing in Clausen far more than, just the building, the people. It goes deep. So I do appreciate that. That's kind of all I have to say on that.
So if you drive down Main Street, right, and you look directly across from our building, there is, I don't know if it's law offices. In the last 3 or 4 years, they redid their facade, right? It's kind of like a grayish stone. Yep. Ours is a grayish stone with a little bit of like light tan in the stone. It looks like a modern look, and then the hardy board will reflect like the tan in the stone, right? So it'll be a little bit darker on the bottom with a little bit lighter tan color of the hardy board that will go around the building, right? And so then we also know that the hardy board, over the years, we got that. We wanted to get hardy board and not some type of aluminum siding or something that is harder to dent. With it being right there on the sidewalk where people walk by, we wanted something strong, long-lasting, and durable. It would have been cheaper to get some siding or whatever, but the hardy board, we also want to do that because it's easier to paint, knowing that 10, 15 years down the road, styles change, things look different, and so the stone will be very long-lasting, but the hardy board is durable and can be, painted. And easily cleaned with a commercial sprayer or whatever to take to.
We often ask to see the actual materials because what has happened is, if you look at Atomic Chicken next door here, is red because the guy took it upon himself to paint it red one day. He didn't come in and ask us about colors or anything else. He just painted it. The restaurant next door is orange because his wife liked orange, so they painted it orange. So that's why I would like to have some type of control over what the materials are.
This probably makes me look bad, but when we had the initial approval in 2015, there was all those, and we still have those renderings, and we had like the stone and those things were here at that meeting. So like the samples.
You brought some stuff in at one point, yeah.
There was at that time after that, above the counter where the building department they had a picture of our rendering posted up, right? Like when we came in with the rendering, I know I handed the stuff to Vidya and she was like, I think she was surprised at, how much we were planning to do and definitely are going to get done.
So you have the stone right now. Do you have the hardy board?
Do not have the hardy board.
Do not. Do you know the cost of it yet? Have you looked into the cost of it yet?
Depending on a couple of different types, we priced it out about 6 months ago, and it was depending on what we were going to get, between like $6,000 and $8,000 for that front facade part of it.
The materials and the installation.
The installation is
it's
being donated.
Right, by contractors. And if I could ask, Pastor, so you initially scout out and purchased the building 2014, 2015, and over the course of the last 5 years or so, and you were immediately faced with these impediments. Your understanding of the process, what might be needed, the resources of the church, what you could do when you did it, and so moving forward to today, and current day, and considering the additional requirements that might still have to be completed, whether it's phased, whether it's all at once. what level of confidence do you have as the head of this, as the head of this church, head of this business, really, that those impediments are, I mean, the impediments were money, and everybody needs money. Every organization needs money, and it
Sure.
comes and it goes. An understanding of the process, what goes into the planning process, whether or not you could comply, securing an architect, the economy going up and down, whatever those impediments were. What level of confidence do you have at this point that those impediments have largely been removed or largely dealt with, save our requirements and city ordinance requirements and planning requirements?
Sure. So on a phased plan, I'm supremely confident that, when we started 2015 and we came to Planning Commission, there was 10 people in the church, and besides children, there was 2 of us that were under 60, right? Me and my wife. So when the church, we've gone from 10 to 60 people with a building that doesn't look like a church. Like, people don't know we're there. And we've grown 6 times. In a time when churches are closing. The churches in the United States have drastically shrunk in the last 6 years, and especially last year with COVID. The crazy thing is that we've grown through COVID. We are bigger and stronger than we were before COVID. I personally think that's doing the part that we gave away thousands of dollars to help families in need during COVID. As a pastor, I believe God has sent us people. And so coming out of COVID, the fact that our church is 25% bigger than we were before COVID, our offerings are 33, 35% stronger than they were before COVID. So I'm going, we have never been in better shape to move forward. And the fact that we have developed relationships with other people who are heavily invested into our church that want to see us succeed outside of our church family itself. So the church that I mentioned in Shelby Township recently sent some of their members to come join our church, and they're fully invested in working in our church. So just offering more resources to people, right? So for me, that front facade, it makes the city look a lot better, but it's infinitely better for us and changes everything. Putting on that corner piece, the front facade, if you gave us a timeline for the front facade, the southwest corner of the building where you pull in off of Main Street, we would wrap that corner because all the stone goes all the way up on either side, and there would be a cross that goes on that. Just that right there would tell somebody there's a church. So if you Google churches in Clawson, not that there's a lot of them, but we come up first, particularly just because we changed the name to the church at Clawson. But people driving by, if they're interested in a church at all, are going to say, what's that church? Just from the cross. But we don't have any of that now. So for me, a phased out approach to say, get that facade done, I think that makes the city look better, and I think it helps the church immensely right out the gate and helps prepare us to do the other projects. Typically, statistics show when churches undergo a major either new building or major facade change that changes the usage, they typically grow by 25% or more in the first 6 months because of that. So that's what we're looking at.
So you've used the term a couple of times, a phased plan. And do understand that this isn't something we can normally ask a business, right? Normally, we just dictate to them,
Sure.
for lack of a better term, what they have to do in the terms. Give me some specific time frames that you're talking about here so we can start to understand what you see as a phased plan to complete what's required for the church.
Sure. If you want to say, I I think it's very generous that you're asking me. On the front facade with the stone sitting there, and already we've had quotes for the windows that would go on that front facade, and the hardy board. I don't see a reason why we shouldn't finish that in 2021. I want to get it done. That's why we purchased the stone. I'm like, let's go. So for me, I'd like to see that. And then, I mean, now you're talking the wintertime, so it's a little more difficult to get outside work, but I still think most of the buildings that sit on Main Street, that front facade is everything, but our building with the parking lot lining Main Street shows so much of that northward facing part of the building, right? If you're driving
Yep.
from here south, that shows. So most of the buildings that you drive down Main Street, all you see is their front facade because they're so closely tight. So I think in the church's best interest as well as the city's best interest is to do that facade next. The parking lot has been existing like that forever, and with the trees planted along there, it enhances what that looks like. The parking lot needs some work, but there's no major potholes. It's nicer to drive on than most of these lots around here. Your car's not going to get torn up in there. Could use some new striping, but the parking it's not a bad parking lot to be in. It's concrete, it's not asphalt. So with that being concrete lot, the way it is, it's pretty good. The one drainage grate in front of the building closest to the residential side needs repair. But I say for looks and what would make the city look the nicest and help the church the most is the facade. So I would want to do the front facade, and then come springtime, start on the parking lot north-facing side facade there. To add on the renderings, there's double doors shown. When you currently come into the building, where you were mentioning where the dumpster was at, is a single door. So it's not the most welcoming of entrances for when you come in. A nice wide double doors there on that facade would also make it very welcoming for people the first moment they come in. So I would say we would want to start that in the spring and have it finished in the summertime.
Can you guys, or Jill, maybe you can answer, if he wanted to paint stripes on his parking lot in order to meet the compliance, is he needing to, what does he need to do that?
I don't know that the parking lot necessarily needs that kind of attention. We didn't call that out in our letter. We did talk about some of the signage.
Signage, okay.
Because this parking lot is striped, and we did identify that because of the widths of those, that one of those is one way only, and so they are striped that way, I believe. But really, it's just the signage that we were concerned about
So
as
if
an
you
additional
can
item.
Print
And I would
signs
say
and-
that if you're asking for additional work beyond what's on this current site plan, that's just for your general information, but any additional facade work isn't included on this site plan, and so we would ask them to come back and visit with you again to get site plan review for those other items. So this site plan is for the west facade. Well, there is, I mean, you show it on the graphic, but I don't think you're planning anything on that north elevation, because
So you're
there's
saying
only
the
one door
west side of
shown.
The front of the building, the west.
There should be more on there, I think, if I
This is
looked
the
over.
north elevation, and it's, everything is existing.
Do you have-
Except for what is being shown here.
Do you have more? Because I would have sworn there was more to that. I think that's what's current. Can you
It says
scroll?
phase one.
Yeah, can you scroll for me?
That's all I have.
I know that when Joan and I sat down and went over this, in that packet shows, both facades of the building. because we understood when we laid it out that while it's not required, it almost needs to be done because of how much visibility that it has. So, I mean, to me, it would make the most sense to knock out that front facade for sure, and then come along the north-facing side and finish that facade off. And I can email whoever current renderings, the coloration is not quite the same as with the stone that we have, but you can see the layout on those renderings of what that looks like.
Yeah,
I'm just not sure that we can impose, maybe, correct me, but like certain phases of things that are, if it's not on the, I keep saying compliance, but I know the conformities, are we able to impose those certain things, like windows and things like that?
I think the windows are part of the front facade, and so that's what
Okay.
he was saying, is that he's got the stone, but he's still waiting for the windows and the hardy plank siding.
The windows
Okay.
are, yes.
But that's part of the front
The
facade.
front facade,
And that's the
okay.
part that's been the biggest bone of contention, because that's the part that's been undone.
Okay.
For several years, as you've indicated. And so I would say, to collect information about further, future plans that they might have is good for information, but I think that the site plan in front of you is for that front facade. And then those couple of other items that we called out in terms of compliance, that you could use put in there as conditions, I think would be helpful.
So you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying, right now, we're not really talking about that north-facing facade. We're just talking about the front.
We don't have plans for the north side.
Got it, okay.
There may be at some point.
There
we
may
don't
be
have
at
it
some
to-
point, and that would be wonderful, and we would be happy to have you come back.
I'm
And
I'm like,
if you have
Joan, do you
other,
have those?
No, we're just looking at the front facade right now.
yeah. So
We can bring the other
Always come
facade
back.
back, Bob, but right now, let's focus on getting the front done.
It's fine.
yeah.
As a practical matter, the lighting, I guess cutting those down or reducing, how would you reduce that down to the 20 feet and the,
Yeah. So Joan and I met about that. The problem that, with the rules or the ordinance or whatever, is that the light was impeding onto the neighbors in the residential area. So initially, I thought, well, it's been existing forever, let me talk to the neighbors, right? So I talked to the neighbors next door and the neighbors across the street, and they all don't want the lighting reduced. I even submitted a letter. They're like, we like the lighting like it is because it provides extra safety in the lot when people come in at night. But what we did is, those lights the lights up there burn more electricity than I want to, and I would love to replace those put LED lights in there. And so we talked to them about what was required, and they said we could put those up, and there's a photometric that shows it not impeding how they will angle the lights. Like, we got a quote and the photometric submitted, and shows how they will angle the lights where it will not impede on them without reducing the height of the light pole that's been in the parking lot for decades.
okay. And then Pastor, I mean, how, excuse me, the plan is potentially to replace poles or just the light and the housing?
Yes, just not the pole, but the fixture
Okay.
itself. And it would, when they fix that, it would not impede upon outside of those lines into the neighbors'
Okay.
And is
area.
that Jill, or Joan, does Joan have that, or Jill, or?
No,
It's
it's
in,
on the photometric.
Oh, on the
And so that
photometric,
was
okay.
the question in the letter was, should they be brought down, or is this shielding and the replacement of the fixture sufficient to meet that standard?
And then money and timing, I'm sorry I just want to add that on, the money and timing, money, meaning is the money available out of the monies that you have right now, or would that be something in a next phase? And then two, is it something where while you're having the facade done, is this something that you foresee you could do at the same time? Or just because of church resources and because of other practicalities, you would have to do that in a next phase?
Sure.
As accurately as you can put
Sure.
it at this point.
So So I think that would depend on what you want me to do in the phase project. I think with regards to the neighbors not having any problems with the way the lights currently sit, I submitted one letter from a neighbor and talked to the other two neighbors, one of whom is we call them like a shut-in, like that she can't get out. She used to attend our church, but we regularly visit her and see her and help her. She likes it there because it makes her feel safe. She can't hardly walk, barely get out her door. And then the other neighbor, which is directly on the other side of Gladwin at the end of the parking lot from the building. It's like a little apartment type complex right there. I don't think he's ever there. I've tried to meet all the neighbors multiple times, and I did finally meet him late this spring or early summer, and he's completely content with it, with the lighting being that way as well.
It's nice to talk to the neighbors and get their okay and approval and everything else. However, we're running a city here.
Sure.
And we have ordinances on the paperwork. Now, if that pole is 5 foot taller than our ordinance allows, I say don't just change the light bulb on it, cut 5 feet off of it. Become conforming. That's why you're here. That's what site plans are all about, to bring this building into conformity. And just because it was there forever doesn't mean that it should stay that way forever. I think it should come down. If the ordinance says it's 5 foot too tall, I say take it down 5 feet.
But is the conformity because of the expanding light, or is the conformity the actual height? From what it sounds like, it's the expanding light and the remnants that it has on surrounding areas, right?
They're in front of us now seeking a site plan, and when you seek a site plan, our job is to look at all elements, the building, the parking, the roofing, everything else, and try to bring them into conformity. So what is the problem with taking 5 feet off of a pole and bringing it into conformity?
It might just be an unnecessary cost if the reason for conformity might be that it's the ambient light that is projected. That might be the actual problem that we're trying to solve, is the ambient light. And if the ambient light, because of new lighting and new technology or whatever you want to call it, allows us to, instead of take 5 feet off a pole, but rather change the housing and the light itself, to me, I would say if that conforms in the terms of ambient light, that I would say that my vote might be to offset the longevity of that.
And Mr. Sinaki here is on the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I think we could throw it his way. If they want to keep that way, they would come in front of the ZBA and ask for a variance, correct? And you guys would make the decision whether they could keep it or not.
Actually, we would not do that.
No?
No, if it's an existing fixture, they're not changing the fixture except for changing they're not
The
changing
light.
the poles at all, they're not adding any poles. If they replace the fixtures, I don't think we would make them shorten all of that up. If they're changing from the bulbs they have to, is it LED fixtures, I think, right?
Yes.
The LED fixtures, that's a benefit because it's going to save energy, but also it is a benefit to the point of being able to direct that light in a way that is more focused on the property and not having spillover. If they were adding fixtures, of course, we would say, no, you have to comply with the ordinance or seek a variance. But in this case, they're existing, and we're trying to bring them as close into conformity as we can, either through shortening the fixtures, the pole heights themselves, or through changing out the fixtures, which actually does a couple of things, as I said, saving energy and allows us to direct the light where we want it to go. So that's up for your consideration.
And then if you did that, Pastor, I mean, if you shortened, let's say you had to shorten the poles. Let's say you didn't have to shorten the poles and you're just changing the fixture. Again, I just wanted to ask, is that something you could include at getting as much done as you can, as, at the highest levels as you can?
As I'm talking to the Water's Edge advisors, where we currently have a loan with, to extend the loan, and then proceeding to our friend church, Lake Point Church in Shelby
I'm sorry,
Township, and who,
Speak up just a bit.
I'm
Thank
sorry.
you. No problem, thank you.
as to who they're working with, then my plan is not to ask for enough money to finish the front facade. My plan is to say, give me all the money. I want to do this all right now, right? So our church can afford the monthly payments on that amount of money. I just don't have that amount of money to pay for it all at once. So my plan is in the next month to have that loan secured and to come in here and say, I don't need no phase project. I want to do it all right now, and have it all finished, right? And next spring, beginning of next summer, everybody's thrilled because the entire building's finished. The parking lot is, fixed up, and the light pole and everything's secure. So I am not looking to. I would appreciate a phase if it doesn't go my way, but I actually think it's going to go our way, and we're going to do the entire project. So I am not looking to phase it out.
Offset chopping down poles unnecessarily and re-poling the parking lot and just repave a parking lot because we have the ability to buy different bulbs. I would say that's a good use of money. I'm not trying to direct you on how to spend your money, but I feel like we're kind of getting a little tedious in how we're regulating a little bit, because you're trying to come into conformity. The bulbs, from what we've heard, meet that conformity. Am I wrong in saying that, Jill? Or the bulbs or what he's changing meets the conformity, the
new
house?
fixtures, when they're shielded and angled away from the residential property line, and you can see that in the photometric plan, all of the light shines on their property and not on the adjacent property. Now, we had also suggested perhaps dimming the lights after hours, but that's, again, not required. Just something that we had thought of as being next to the neighbors, although they're not here to say whether they would prefer that or not. I would remind you that site plan approval is valid for a year, and so that's your phase for this project. That the north facade, and then any of the other conditions that you wish to impose upon this approval, should you be willing to do that, would be valid for a year. If there are additional elements and additional improvements, like the north facade or the other side, anything else that you want to do, you can come back. We're happy to have you. That would be an amended site plan, and you would look at that again. So that would be our recommendation.
2 questions. Has the city engineering determined that there is a engineering problem with the current parking lot?
An engineering problem?
Like potholes, cracks?
No. No,
So
we had
the-
a letter that came with the last packet when they were here back in April.
Okay.
So they did have some comments about the driveway width, which we can work with them on that. And I think they had some of the concerns that we shared with the signage, or maybe that was our note from them. But they will see the plans again.
So the next question is, if you redo the parking lot, or, spend money on the parking lot, does that require another site plan approval?
Depends on what they're doing.
Well,
If they're
I
simply
guess-
restriping it the way it's currently, if they're gonna repave it, which it doesn't sound like they need to at this point, but if they did, restripe it the same way it's configured now, no, they wouldn't have to come back. If they're gonna make any changes, they're gonna expand, they're gonna shrink, they're gonna take out spaces, it depends, we can look at the ordinance to see what that threshold is, if that is a trigger to come back, but it probably is, and you would see that plan again.
It's been my experience that characteristically through planning and zoning, when somebody's doing something that requires a building permit or a site plan approval or whatever it requires, we try to look globally at the complete property and the zoning ordinance, and we try to shove everything that's necessary to bring it up to code, up to standards, up to the general requirements. In this case, if we recognize that the parking is not optimized, and they give us a letter of intent that says that when they need to do something to the parking, that they'll come back and they'll recognize the width and the islands and anything else to bring that up. Because if you separate that, to me, it looks like facade, lighting, parking signage, screening of the rooftop, and planters.
And the tree in the right-of-way.
One tree, right? One.
Tree.
Okay.
Well, if it's in the right-of-way and it's dead, can't the city put a new one in?
That was part of their original agreement before we were working with you, but we understood that was something that you had negotiated together, so. That's
You who?
the
city.
applicant and the city had negotiated together.
Not you.
Those, not you, those 6 trees in the right-of-way was part of the 2017 effort at site plan compliance.
I recognize that there's history, but I'm trying to do what we need to do today, regardless of history. To me, if the tree died in the city's easement, then the city would put it into their probably long list of tree replacements and not make it part of this particular site plan requirement.
Yeah, I think at the time, it was likely done because it was the constraints of the property, the way it's been built, couldn't afford them the ability to, they didn't have any space to put any trees or landscaping, and so
Right.
those trees that were required by the ordinance, those frontage trees, were put in the right-of-way, but they were provided by the church. Regardless of how that was funded, that was where it came from.
They were provided by the city, were they not? Those
How-
are city trees, I
It was a
believe.
requirement of the 2017,
In the name of green space and
Yes.
sustainability, but
yes.
really, does it say that they have to be liable for the life of the tree? I don't know. I mean,
Well, yes.
It
I mean,
does,
really,
okay.
if it's a requirement, if they were on private property and we were talking about the requirements of the frontage trees or the greenbelt trees, and you said there's 3 trees that are dead, you have to fix them, because that's part of your approved site plan, that's part of your requirement of.
going in.
Well, or 5 years from now.
Okay,
Yeah, they're still required.
okay.
But that's up to you. That's completely up to you on that. And you can condition that further improvements to the site come to the planning commission for site plan review.
So,
And
and
we
that
can
would
have this
be
conversation
like the
again.
north facade, things like that,
Yes.
correct? Yes.
Anything to the parking lot.
So right now, we could make a motion that doesn't have any real requirements for anything to be done in the parking lot right now. Is that correct?
Except for maybe the signage.
Except for maybe the signage?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I would say compliance with the city engineers' standards, that they'll take a look at that as well. Because I think, as I said, I believe in April, they had a comment about the driveway width, that it was too wide for two-way traffic, so they wanted it to be narrowed. We didn't get a follow-up letter, but that was from the previous submission from them.
Well, that could be reconfiguring the whole
So
parking.
do we
They have to
have to
comply
do
with-
something about that driveway width right now?
No.
No.
No, okay.
No.
But we would want to see what the stone looks like, right? In the hardy board.
One more time, I'm
We
sorry.
want to see what the stone in the hardy board looks like,
Right,
right?
and
So
you
that would
can-
be the color renderings,
You
is what you
can-
were saying?
Yes, or you can, I think some of you had suggested that you could put into your motion that the color palette be compatible with adjacent buildings in the area, maybe improved adjacent buildings, that way we are more of the newer things, across the street, in the area, of a neutral nature, subject, and if you'd like it to be subject to the planning department, planning division's approval, I'm sure that's something that we can handle on your behalf with that clear guidance in your motion.
So we can leave those color choices up to, I'm sorry, is it Tom? Bob.
Yes, you are suggesting, though, that it
That
be
it
compatible
falls
with
compatible
the
with, okay.
buildings in the area and of a neutral color palette, I would say. Tans, browns, grays. That sounds like what you had in mind, right?
That works good.
Okay.
I brought up the phasing, because I've been up here for a couple of years playing this. First time I think I saw it was when, what was the name of that company? Tribal Fair.
Yes.
They took a house, they made it into a commercial building, and they didn't have enough money to do all the work at one time. So we gave them phases. We gave them phase one, you complete this phase, come in and show us that you're doing well, and then move on to phase two. Well, they since sold out and moved out of town. But that's what my problem here is. You're coming in here for a site plan approval, and I'm very leery of giving a full site plan approval at this time with so many items outstanding. However, we're at a catch-22, because if we don't kill the stop work order, he can't do anything. He has to have one or the other here. So that's why I mentioned phase. If we could somehow lock it in that it's September now, it's going to start getting cold here. This work has to be done rather rapidly. I don't want to give a site plan approval and find out that no work is being done, even though the site plan is good for a full year. I don't want to be here next year and you coming and telling us the same thing. You see my point?
Yes.
I want this done in a timely manner somehow, but I'm not sure how we can establish that, how we can force
Is it
that.
feasible that with us being in the middle of September right now, is there feasibility that he can actually even put that stone up before we get a frost?
Physically, I think so. Financially, I don't know. He doesn't have the loan yet, right? You're talking about maybe getting a loan next month.
Well, I have this, now there's hardy board that goes on the side as well, but I have $16,000 of stone sitting behind the building paid for. It's on our property.
You have
But
a
the
stone, you
cost
don't
of
have
putting
the
this-
hardy board, and you don't have any guarantee that you're gonna get the money to buy it with at this point, do you?
I have enough money to purchase the hardy board. I don't know if I have enough money currently to purchase the windows.
See, that's
Did
where
you
we're-
say,
that's
you
where
said
it's
you
from.
have 13,000, and really, I don't think that regulating your bank account is part of what we're doing, but didn't you say that you had $13,000 also cash or whatever in your account in order to make these changes?
Plus volunteer labor that's already
Plus
been,
volunteer
that's
labor.
already been committed.
If it's good for a year, it's good for a year. We can't say that it's only good for 3 months. Like, we can't say we approve it, but you have to be finished in 3 months. If it's an approval, that's a good.
If we cut it into phases, we
Finish in 3
could.
months. We didn't tell him to be finished in 3 months.
But you said you don't want to be here in a year. He might say that, but really, he has a year to finish. So, I mean, like, that's kind of like how this is set forth, unless I'm wrong, I don't know.
I would suggest you may have in your, because of the history of the site, an interest in seeing the facade improved sooner. If you're considering a phase that would say, the applicant indicated that the facade could be completed by the end of the year, if you said that was phase one, and that the remaining things can be completed in 2022 up until the point when the site plan expires, I think that would be within your purview.
That's what I would think, yes.
If they can't, they're gonna have to come, they'll have to come back and meet with you
If you
again.
can't come here in like December and show us some progress has been made, do we have the possibility then of saying, we can't renege that at that point in time, we can't
If that's a
withdraw.
condition of site plan approval
that
and it's
on-
not complied with,
There we
then
go, that's what I'm looking for. That
By
has-
3 months,
that
we're
has to be
making
one of our
them-
conditions, a timeline.
It's contingent that what is finished by December. I mean, really, that
Whatever you
seems
must
a
be
little
done.
rough.
well,
Whatever
it's a tight timeline.
It's a
And
tight
so
timeline,
I know that-
especially with the weather we've been having, and I'm not trying to play it off, but really, when you take into account acts of God or other things that may happen, we're giving them you want to make it contingent upon the whole front facade being completed in 3 months? Disapproval? Is that what we're saying, or no?
What happened to the 7 years that they had to do it prior?
But they haven't been in front of us for 7 years. They've been getting
No,
their
they actually
ducks
have.
in a
They
row.
actually have.
They have
This
been.
is not the first time he's been in front of us.
With an actual site approval saying we have the money and the facade and everything, I don't know.
They've had plans submitted to the city for many, many years, and they have been before the planning commission a couple
So
of
what
times.
stopped us in the past?
In June 9th of 2015, and I mentioned the people that aren't here anymore, that used to be Bob Blanchard was in this chair, and half the people, Scott was the only one that was here at the time. Site plan approval for that came up. Mr. Alan Hall, he was the architect at the time with API, which I see the same blueprints we're seeing now, projected a November completion. Vidya, who was our city planner at the time, suggested phasing the plan approach with a timeline to be determined. And they have 6 conditions that they gave them. That was never done. Nothing was done after that.
None of the 6
2015
conditions were done?
2015, nothing was
Okay,
done.
so
They came
can
and
you
approved
speak
it.
to like
Senator
why
approved it.
maybe those weren't completed, or are you aware? Or can you give us some reference?
Yes.
It doesn't make any difference.
We still, okay.
Not really.
Yeah, it really doesn't.
If,
Okay. Do you want me to speak? or
not yet.
I'm
One
okay.
second. But thanks. The front of the building is partially deconstructed.
Yes.
All right. I believe that it's time for a motion. I'm ready to make one.
Good. Love to hear it.
And then we can bang out the details. And I don't think, I know that the past is driven what we're gonna do today, but you either look at a partially demolished front for another 2 years while they raise enough money, or we do what I'm gonna try to hit here.
Before
So,
you,
can-
before you make that motion, Ed, could I just mention something, or just ask, I guess? This site plan is, the application was, the most recent one was when? What was the initial date of this site plan that we're considering? It wasn't 2015. What is our, or is it?
Well, we had it in 2018, and then I think a couple times in 2018 and 2021 earlier this year, April, I think.
Yeah,
Okay.
2 are dated 2019 and 1's dated 2021.
Okay, so are we considering, I know it sounds like a silly question, I should know this, or we should know this, is this a 2021 site plan? Is this, what's the date that this was submitted? This current, we're not looking all the way back to 2015 and saying, it's been 6 years of an inability to finish out a site plan that was proposed at that time? Or are we looking at a document that was recently submitted with different resources, better plans, stone purchased, a stronger church, and a stronger game plan at this point? I mean, I guess that's where I'm trying to get to. That's why I asked Pastor what impediments he still believed were in his way to finalize, if we approve this, conditionally or not, are you gonna get it done? And what is he getting done? I guess I'm professionally, precedent is an incredibly important thing. In my chosen profession, it's an incredibly important thing. But I want to know what the date of the site plan is that we're currently considering. So,
I would say April,
of this year.
yes.
In 2015, it expires after a year. When they
Understood.
approved it in 2015, right, it expired in 2016. Is that correct? Am I correct in assuming that? Yeah. So,
They are in there now with no current site
Okay.
plan, no temporary certificate of occupancy, no right of occupancy. Absolutely nothing between the church and the city is carved in stone.
Okay.
We have no paperwork.
But they've reapplied as of April of this year, correct?
Well,
Okay.
actually, page 3 is dated July 19th of this year.
Okay.
well, kudos to you for not giving
So
up.
part of it,
Keep going.
it's July, the one page is July 19th of 2021.
And I'm sorry, Ed, I didn't mean to take away from your moment.
No,
A motion
no.
would be great. I needed to understand the timeline a little better than I did. Thank you, Pastor.
Did you want to say anything before we go? Because you can do that while I get to the front page here.
I would say I fully understand your frustration with me and our church, and it's not unwarranted at all. So I'm not sitting here going, come on, guys, whatever. No, I understand. You have a city that you are trying to care for and improve. And I appreciate that, and I'm grateful for what you're doing. And I came in here, with my head down because we haven't got to where I wanted to get, which is where you want to get. And I would agree that we are on the same page as far as we want to accomplish what you want because it's mutually beneficial to us both. And as a church, I'm not trying to make money. I'm trying to help the city, right? That is my heartbeat, to work with the city, to make, not just have a growing church, but to have a church that I want our building to be used 6 or 7 days a week, not by us, but by multiple people. And we're there where it's being used 3 or 4 times a week by other organizations. And so for me, I would say although it doesn't seem like it, I'm on your side. I want what you want. So I'm not trying to do, I'm not trying to skirt around rules. Should I know better? Absolutely. But I'm a dad with 3 kids who's working 2 and 3 jobs to pay for things. And I went to school to be a pastor. And so everything, when I read into this stuff, it takes away from my 10 or 15 hours that my church pays me for during the week to put together sermons and run kids programs and outreach to the community. I'm spending trying to read through ordinances. And so that plan, I went, all right, let's go after it in 2015. And then I was told by Vidya and by others, do the parking lot. Well, then we started doing pricing on that, and that was $250,000. So I'm like, this is impossible for us to do. We barely spent more than that to purchase the building. And so then not to be harsh on the city, but with the constant people changing in and out, I've met with several different people as to regards to why the facade is off on that front facade. First of all, it was partially falling off in spots because it was old. So I was like, this is dangerous with people walking up and down those streets. And I don't even remember his name, the guy who came in after Jim Albus, but I talked to him on the phone because we were talking about the building, and I said, can I remove this facade? I'm ready to buy the stone, and the little pebbles and the stucco that was there on the side was cracking. And he said, yeah, I don't see why you can't remove the facade.
That was probably Aaron Irwin, and he's no longer with us.
Right. So I'm just saying, even removing the facade was not done as hey, I'm just doing what I want to do. It was, this is looking dangerous to me. The last thing I want is somebody walking by our building and it falling over on top of somebody. So to get down to that, now, it was also a benefit to us to remove it because we found stuff under the facade that we had no idea was there. There are very old glass block windows that weren't there at all. So if we would have torn that off and made, so we're kind of going, whatever. So we did it out of a safety concern, plus with talking to the former building inspector person. So that was,
Bob,
that's what we did.
If I may interrupt, when they started this project, we did not have a development team that handheld people and walked them through the process and explained how things work. We've improved that a lot now. So they do have their site plan before you now. They just want to finish the front facade, which we all want to see. Restripe a little bit in the parking lot. Make sure the tree doesn't die. The reason that they did the trees was because there was an agreement between the city with Susie Steck, John Kingsup, and whoever was city manager at the time, that they would not have to redo their parking lot, but they could do these trees out front. So these are the items that are before them today, before you today. And the light, which they're going to replace with LED. So they do have their photometric plan, and these are the things that we told them to bring in for their site plan today, so that they could finally get this reviewed, get it hopefully accepted, and move forward.
And I do know that when Main Street, total side note, was closed down, and I am on the Facebook forum quite often, I thought it was great that Barb's talked a lot about struggling with their parking, and you guys, someone, I don't know if it was you, I believe it was you, said, use our parking lot. Tell your people to come use our parking lot, no problem at all. It speaks a lot to the community that you're trying to invest in and how you're neighborly. So I just want to compliment you on that.
Our parking lot, we made an arrangement also with Woodpile, seeing as how they didn't have very much parking. Woodpile uses our parking lot. During the pandemic, we had an agreement that they would pay us so much amount per month. And when the pandemic started, they called me up and they were like, look, we don't know what we're going to have. I said, don't send us anything. Park in our lot. Like, don't worry about it. I'm not coming after you for the money. So, our parking lot, our building, I think with this in there, we're a huge asset to the city.
Absolutely.
And I agree again.
It is, Bob.
It needs to be fixed.
But understand, I understand the things you're doing for community, I do, and I respect it, and thank you for doing that. But also understand that we here have given a lot of latitude to you too, though.
Yes, you have.
Businesses wouldn't be getting the same latitude. So we do understand what you do, and we do respect it, and we do appreciate it, but understand that we're doing the same thing on our end, because there's a lot of other things we could do, and no one really wants to do it. I don't think there's anyone that has any desire to put a stop order or say, hey, listen, you can't occupy the building and all. It's just, so we're working with you as much as you're working outside in the community too.
I appreciate it. I understand. There's no, if we weren't a church, I get it. I appreciate it.
Good.
Did that give you enough time?
Do you, as a show of good faith, tomorrow morning, I can call the lighting company that we got the photometric with, because they're ready. They're like, let's go. We can get that done, and then they're ready to start work on it. We can get that done in the next 2 weeks, as soon as they're ready. We could knock that out right away. I can go to work on, I'll probably ask for a little bit of clarity on where the signs go for the parking lot, but I'm happy to try to start knocking stuff out, and then I can communicate with you, like, say, 3 weeks from now on, where I'm sitting in the loan process and where we're at.
It's interesting you bring that up, because I was just going to ask the question, what if to devil's advocate, you can't get a loan? What happens at that point?
Well,
I think it's fair to say that if they didn't have the finances, the money to do it, they wouldn't do it, and then the project would still be where it's at right now, which is not finished. I think that's, where they've been for the past several years. Again, they're trying to submit everything that we've asked over the last couple of months. They've done that. They have the stone, so they're maybe halfway, maybe a third of the way towards getting that up and running. You own the building, so if worse comes to worse, you're not going to be able to sell a building that looks like that. You're going to get the facade improved, and if you need to do what you need to do, you're going to move on. I think it would be, with all due respect, it's been an hour and 40 minutes that you've been talking with the applicant about this site plan. And I think that maybe either you ask for more information and postpone this again, or consider making a motion. It sounded like Mr. Snaki was ready to make a motion, and I don't want to cut you off, and I don't want to be disrespectful, but I know we also have someone else waiting, and we have one other item on the agenda. So I just want
that's
to keep
fair.
you rolling. Thank you.
I'm sorry,
You guys have worked out it?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion concerning the property identified as 655 South Main Street, currently occupied by a church at Clausen.
The
Church at Clausen. It's in the BRD1 Business District, in which the places of worship are permitted. I'm going to consider this a incomplete or partial site plan approval for the following items. This is given from the fact that the deteriorated front facade has already been removed, and we need to move forward, given that not all of the BRD1 criteria will be met with this partial approval. It's for the West Main Street facade, for parking lot lighting, parking lot signage, screening of the rooftop HVAC equipment, and for some adaptation of planters in the parking lot area to give some level of green space. There's several contingencies talked about in here. The things that are not addressed with respect to the BRD1 district are parking lot, islands, layouts, and driveways, and the green belt in the parking lot area. The applicant has indicated there's a gray and tan stone that they will be used for the west facade. It will be color compatible. Contingency is that the color palette be neutral colors. This was identified as tan, beige, and grays. And it's compatible with the improved buildings in their color palettes and executions along South Main Street. The Planning Commission recognizes that the parking lot and its layout is approved acceptable at this time, although there may need to be a painting of the stripings. We recognize that with this incomplete site plan approval, that further improvements to the site need to come back to the Planning Commissions. Specific examples are the north facade and anything to do with the parking lot or greenbelt executions.
How do we address I'm sorry, can I ask, or is it procedurally, do we wait until?
I'll ask, one thing that throws me off is using the word incomplete site plan. I've never heard that term used before.
So are you seeking a variance on those things, right?
Usually we approve a site plan or we disapprove a site plan, but I've never used the term incomplete.
Well, it is recognized as incomplete because it doesn't meet the criteria for parking lots and green belts.
What we've
So-
done in the past then is to tell the applicant to go away and come back with another plan that is complete enough that we can vote on.
I know, but that's not gonna happen tonight.
Okay?
Can we seek a variance on those? Was your
Well,
motion to seek a
No,
variance?
this is just the motion to execute those particular items. And then at the time that the parking lot needs to be redone, or at the time that they come in for the north facade, that it comes back before the planning commission and a different execution of an enhanced site plan. I guess maybe it's a site plan, but it's recognized as an incomplete site plan.
Or that you recognize there are existing nonconformities with the site that aren't being affected by the current project.
Well, that's a great wording.
Okay.
Eventually, Nick, I think you can get that into it. And
And
put
then-
that back in the front wherever it needs to be.
Yes, and that
Thanks.
future projects will require site plan review again.
Yes.
Perfect.
You have a point?
Procedurally, how do we address the stop order? Does the building department, does it have to be part of the motion to rescind the stop work order?
I'm not exactly sure who issues that. I know that without a
It's
site
the
plan
building-
approval,
It's a building official, and it's related to the no site plan. So once they have a site plan, they'll get their permits, and building department will check to make sure that it's compliant with the site plan, and then they'll remove it.
They'll remove it, okay.
Can I
And
second
we have a
that
meeting
motion?
tomorrow, in fact, so we'll probably talk about it.
Sorry,
I'm sorry?
sorry. I was just gonna second his motion. Sorry.
you don't want.
So if you want to, in general, these things are complex, and if anybody else, I open it up as the presenter of the motion, that if anybody else wants to ask questions or make wording revisions, just like Jill did to help me with that statement about what I really meant to say the first time, I'm open to that.
Right.
So,
Back to when you say incomplete site plan approval, does that mean we're gonna give them that, and that will be a 1-year site plan approval, or do you want to put a time limitation on that?
I don't think that we can recognize the weather in Michigan and the constraints of the construction industry to say that it's got to be done in a shorter period of time. If 1 year is our standard, then this is 1 year. But I think based upon this discussion, the applicant knows that it is a firm 1 year. It's not loosey-goosey.
I think I could live with that. Any changes or additions? I have a motion. Do I have support for that?
I already did.
She already supported it. Yep.
Yeah.
And no further discussion. Roll call, please.
Mr. Pernick?
Yes.
Ms. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Sinaki?
Yes.
Yes?
Mr. Fitzer?
Yes.
Mr. Kucera?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good luck.
Thank you for your kindness towards us.
Thanks for taking so much time tonight.
Go home now
Thank
and
you for
wipe
your
the
time.
sweat off your brow.
Well, the last half hour, my wife's been calling me, so my son is stuck at the church from the Boy Scout meeting, so he's waiting for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Pastor.
Thank you.
We'll talk. Joan, I probably
luck.
will reach out to you soon.
Best of
you.
luck on all your finances and
Thank you.
volunteer help. I know how that goes.
Thank you.
The next item that we have is a presentation from Erica Kleitz from Oakland County Cisma, and she will tell you what that's all about. And hopefully I think it's a fairly short presentation, but you can have as much time as you want because you sat here for almost 2 hours.
Thank you very much. As I say now for something completely different. So my name is Erica Kleitz, and I'm the director of Oakland County Cisma. We are the invasive species organization for Oakland County, and the city of Clawson is a member of Cisma. So I'm here tonight just telling you a little bit about the Cisma and how some options for how Clawson can become more involved in addressing invasive species in your community. So as you may be aware, invasive species are those that are not native. They could be any type of organism, from an animal to a plant or a fungus even. The issue with invasive species is that they have few natural competitors. So it turns into what you see in the one photo there with vines growing over everything. They also have the ability to change soil chemistry, harm native plants, and unbalance ecosystems. Invasive plants can also damage infrastructure. What you see in this photo is showing Phragmites on the left and knotweed on the right. And those are common occurrences that we see where they're actually coming through roads, bridges, and in the case of knotweed, even structures, including foundations. When Phragmites, that tall grass with the tassel on the end, is dry, it can create quite a fire hazard because it burns very hot. This was from a fire several years ago at the Great Lakes Crossing Mall. which they actually couldn't put out because it was so hot, so they just had to wait for it to burn out. In terms of the ecological services provided, invasive plants create monocultures, which means they're the only thing present in the area, and that crowds out really everything else. So this stand of Phragmites, there's really nothing living in there, a few birds maybe on the top, but nothing else can be in that area, versus their diverse ecosystem, which you see on the lower right. That's more what an ecosystem should look like. And that supports a lot more of our native species. So our goal is to support functioning ecosystems and enhance quality of life through invasive species management. We do this through three main areas. One is to prevent the spread of these species, educate people about them, to respond to new detections of species, because we can't just keep adding them on to this list over time, and to work on long-term problems. For example, we manage the road right-of-way treatments of Phragmites on the county roads throughout the county. This is a map of our current membership. As I mentioned, Clausen is a member. And our members also include, in addition to the municipalities, we have land conservancies and other nonprofits like watershed councils. We do provide a number of benefits for our members, including eligibility for millage-funded invasive species treatment projects. So we were included as part of the Oakland County Parks millage, which was passed in November, which means that we have more funding available for these types of projects. We also provide mapping services and assistance. In Clausen specifically, I had talked with the previous city manager about doing surveys for knotweed, because this is a species, I'll talk more about it in a moment, but is present in this general area and is a problem even in small yards. So it's very visible this time of year, and we thought this could be a good way to just start getting some data and seeing if it's present in the community. We also provide advice on how to treat invasive species, access to county contracts, and then access to training and outreach materials, some of which I believe were on the table when you came in tonight, but we have a lot more on our website. Okay, so knotweed. This is a plant that comes from an area of volcanic soils, which is a problem because it's used to being run over by lava flows, and then it just stays dormant for years and can pop right back up again. And it can break through rock, i.e. also house foundations, because that's what it does typically in those areas. This is one of the worst invasives in the world. In Great Britain, you cannot sell a house without having a contract to treat knotweed because of how bad it is and how much there is. So we do not want to get to that state here in Michigan. The good news is we are not there yet, but the bad news is there's a lot of knotweed around. So it's very visible right now because it has, sometimes people refer to it as Michigan bamboo. It has these long hollow stems. This is what it looks like right now. It's blooming. It can grow up to 10 or 12 feet tall. It has these green-white flowers. When it first comes up in the spring, that's what it looks like here. It looks like asparagus. And then in the fall or winter, the stalks die off, and it looks like that. It's important that you use the right methods when you control knotweed. This is a good example of one that you can't just cut down or mow. Actually, mowing spreads it and makes it worse. So it's important to know what you're dealing with. And this is a building that's in Farmington. That was not the only building in Farmington that we observed knotweed coming right out of the side of the building, which is not good. I'll just mention a few other species today. One is Phragmites, probably familiar with this as you've seen it along road right-of-ways, which grows taller than knotweed, but is somewhat less destructive. Reason we work with the Road Commission is because of the safety concerns. It can bend sort of over the road and you can't see it, can't see around corners, which is bad. They have done scientific studies also that show that the presence of Phragmites negatively impacts property values. And there are different control methods that I'm not going to go over tonight. Some other common species in people's yards include woody invasive species. So these are things like buckthorn, autumn olive, and invasive honeysuckles. These are very common, and I'm sure you have a lot of them in Clausen, as in many communities. But it's a good example of something where there probably is an example in almost everyone's yard if they haven't started working on this already. Some other species include garlic mustard. This is one that we can pull out by hand in the spring. A newer invader is Chinese yam. That's that vine you see there. We've only found it in 2 places in Oakland County so far, but we're trying to stay on top of it because we don't want it to be the next thing. And I just put one other example, which is Tree of Heaven. In summary, invasive species control protects public safety and property values. Invasive species do require long-term management, and that's what we're here for. So we're here to help you with mapping and monitoring invasive species. We're here to help all citizens of Oakland County with invasive species identification and control. And we have a lot of outreach materials which we've produced, which you all can share. And so I submit that for your consideration. And this is where you can find all of our other materials. We also have a lot of short and longer videos, webinars that we've posted on our YouTube page. So I'll leave it there unless you have any questions.
Yeah, I have a question. So if, like, one of these things you just mentioned, and here I recognize in my backyard, is it also part of what we're educating people to say, hey, listen, there's ways to eradicate that, and do you want people to do that, or do you want, like, what are you guys looking to have people do when they recognize these things?
Yes, if someone's interested in controlling it, then that's ideal. Then yes, we would provide information on how to do that. That's what a lot of our materials, which I left back there, but if you looked at them, a lot of them are homeowners' guides to invasive species management. So it's designed for, like, if you have a few stalks of Phragmites in your backyard, this is what you can do. And it also goes over, because with some of these things, for example, if you're treating something in water, there's a permit requirement with that. So it goes over some of those kind of caveats, but also provides that information about how to control it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Are the grant funds, excuse me, or the funds that you have available, are those available to?
Those are for
private
public
homeowners?
properties.
Public properties, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We are looking into, well, what we're trying to do for the private properties is to make the contracting process easier, because we recognize that it's very difficult for people to get a contractor to come treat a small project. It's just not that cost effective for the contractors. So that's something we're working on solving, and I think we'll be able to have some better options for that next year. But yeah, in general, the funding that we have available is available for public properties, because we think that those remaining public over time, it's kind of a better investment. It's not always as clear with private properties what might happen to them.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So are you asking, if a citizen in Clawson sees an invasive species, are you asking that they contact you, or?
They can,
Yeah.
so people can report things through, there's a couple different apps they can use. There's one called MISIN. So they can report them. The ones we really want people to pay attention to and report are those newer species. So like the Chinese yam, for example. They can report any of the species, and they can contact us if they're looking for advice on how to control those. But I guess we would also ask that you, if you so choose, share some of the materials that we are producing as a way to help with that awareness of the community.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? No, thank you very much.
Thank you. This is very informative. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Good.
And
You're
there's
welcome.
brochures at the counter in the back if you want to pick some up on the way out. Let's move on to other business, item B, zoning amendment, medical cannabis, primary caregivers.
Okay, so the last item on our agenda, let's go to it. Okay. So you have seen this information that we've presented in the packet on the medical cannabis, the primary caregivers. This is primary caregivers only. This doesn't address any of the other cannabis facilities that are permitted in the state, and nothing to do with the initiatives that are on the ballot this November. This is a completely separate ordinance. Just wanted to remind you of that. You did see this and discuss it back in June 22nd and August 8th of this year. We did put together a short frequently asked questions, and I believe that's up on the city's website. Yes. We did that last month, so just to have that as a refresher for what those are. And I guess every time I reconnect, it takes a second. So you'll remember that the primary caregivers are licensed by the state of Michigan under the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act, the MMMA, which does allow registered caregivers to grow medical cannabis for up to 5 registered patients. So that is 6 plants per patient, plus the person themselves can grow, so that's 72 plants. And right now, they're not regulated in the city, and they can be anywhere as long as they're in compliance with state law. The city cannot prohibit them, but we can put reasonable regulations on them and permit them only in certain parts of the city. And so if I could just turn the page. There we go. So we have the draft ordinance language that you have this evening. It identifies 2 specific districts, the I-1 Industrial District and the BRD-2 District. We do, in that language, provide regulation for the operations. Some of the things that we regulate are prohibiting on-site distribution, require permits, certificates of occupancy. We limit signage, nuisances, particularly with respect to odor, and air quality to surrounding properties, and also creates a parking requirement, a standard for those facilities. It does not remove any operations that were legally established, but would prevent them from operating in any other district besides I-1 or BRD-2 going forward. Oops, that was that. So that's all I had really for the slides. I do have my copy of it if you have any questions. We have had the city attorney review this language, and he finds it to be satisfactory. So I think because you have had a chance to look at this and discuss it a couple of times, when you're ready, we can schedule a public hearing for that. But I'm happy to answer any other questions that you have in the meantime.
You say you're limiting them to two different areas?
Yes, the I-1 district, I-1 district and BRD-2.
BRD-2.
Yes, and I can show you if you want to see.
How can we as a city of Clawson limit a business that we're not really aware of? Or they're licensed by the state of Michigan, so
They are.
if I decided in my house that I want to get the license and do it, I wouldn't tell the city.
Well,
So how do we limit them to these 2 areas when?
it does.
I don't see how we have the control over that.
Well, we do. If we may not know if someone starts, but certainly if there are odors detected at the site, if there are repeated investigations, if it's determined that a homeowner or a property owner is doing something in a home that they're not allowed to do according to the city zoning ordinance, they're not allowed to do that.
So if they catch somebody and they're not in these 2 areas,
Correct.
they get trouble?
Correct.
Didn't they also talk about water consumption, electrical consumption
Yes,
too, as
absolutely.
something that they can monitor? And
That's how we can spot them, because the state won't tell us who they are.
Correct.
Seems
But
very
that's-
odd, but
One of the, actually, that's the main reason why we would create this kind of regulation, is to remove those facilities primarily from the residential areas, because they can be very problematic.
So I have a few different things, and I apologize that I didn't email you ahead of time.
Okay. All
Sorry.
right, I'm ready.
Okay. When looking at all these different ones, what I do is I just go to Municode and I
Sure.
look at different cities. And so there's a few different cities that build them in to their overarching marijuana regulations, and it seems very well. And I know we can't necessarily do that, right? But in that, I did find, I believe it was Lansing, I didn't write down the city, but they did limit the ability for caregivers to essentially stack next to another facility of like kind. And I know that Rennes isn't here, but it seems like there's a little bit of, I don't know, is that, I know you're not an attorney, is that allowed? Because essentially, if they talk about building buffers in terms of residential or how many caregivers we have that are able to stack and piggyback in one commercial building, and then we talk about the licenses that might come in the future, is that something we're able to put into an ordinance on the front end of this?
No, because we're only addressing the one specific license type, and that's primary caregiver.
So we can't address a license, like
A grower or a processor?
Well,
No.
they like I said, and I don't remember if this one addressed all of them in the one or they had, obviously they broke it down in many different ways, right? But I don't remember if this was one where they stacked the caregiver in the city, in all the growers and all the other ones all in one, but they were able to decipher a buffer between like kind facilities.
So, because we're only talking about the one license type, if you wanted to, if you said, we have said in the ordinance, and this is on page 5 of the draft, under standards for C minimum floor area, we've said 750 square feet of floor area per primary caregiver and a maximum of 3 caregiver facilities per building. But that doesn't mean that they couldn't go next to each other, next door, on a separate property, because we do not include any kind of a buffer between them at this point.
And we also,
The districts themselves aren't really that big, so if I switch.
but in terms of future planning, if we,
Well,
and again,
future planning meaning future license types?
no, I just mean like, in terms of zoning maps and things like that. I thought it was, when I went through all these, a lot of them were very specific, right? And when they talked about buffers, they also talked about residential buffer, and I know that you said we gotta be careful there because we're kind of all residential, right?
We're all residential.
Yeah.
There's really no.
But there can still be buffers put in place in terms of churches, schools, places where children are frequent, such as parks.
You can certainly do that. However, if you look at the map, we're talking about BRD2, which is the big bright red up at the northwest corner. And we're looking at I-1, which is north on Rochester Road in the purple areas, at the north end of Rochester Road, and then a little bit at the south end of Rochester Road. So that's the extent of the districts. And so to create an additional buffer, we don't want to create such buffers so that we end up zoning them out completely, because we're not allowed to do that.
Well, that's not what I'm looking to do, and I know you guys keep thinking I'm trying to do that. I'm not doing that.
No, I'm
But
just
saying,
explaining that we can't.
If there is a daycare in BRD2, and we have a 1,000-foot buffer or a 200-foot buffer, that's not gonna zone them out. That's just saying you can't come close to this building here. It doesn't mean you can't be in BRD2. It just means that, hey, if there's a daycare at BRD2 right here, you gotta go up at BRD2 over there. So
Right.
I don't think that having a buffer is trying to zone anybody out of an ordinance.
Sure.
But I do think that by building that in right now instead of amending it in the future, or I think that allowing that buffer to be in place is a good thing. In from all the different ones that I've read, and I've read a lot of different codes.
We have
it
too.
seems pretty common. Oh, and I know you have.
We
I'm
have
not
too, and
questioning.
we've written a lot of them
really,
also,
I know
but-
you're the expert here, but
Yes.
it doesn't seem like it's that uncommon to where I'm not an attorney, but I don't think that we're being extreme in our zoning here.
Absolutely can regulate them to be reasonable. So as long as you're permitting them, you can impose restrictions that control some of the negative impacts of that, for sure, as long as you're being reasonable about them. So I guess I would ask, and I know probably a lot of the ordinances that you're reading that have that buffer to all those different facilities, they're probably more of the other types of facilities. They're probably more along the lines of the dispensary, the provisioning center, the grow facility, the processor, places where a lot of product is coming and going. The primary caregiver, we've said you can't use it on the site, you can't even look like you're a site, you can't have people coming to visit your site. It's really a very limited operation. So I guess I would ask, we can always add buffers, we can always add conditions, but when I always try to start with, well, what are we trying to mitigate? What's the problem that we're trying to
Essentially,
address?
I think if we stack, and I know you said you only stack 3, but essentially if we stack multiple ones, they're operating as if they were a bigger facility. So I would say that considering, I know that I looked at some cities allow caregivers right within the neighborhoods, and they've just zoned them right in, and they seem to have a lot of regulations that I don't know how they work well, but they've built it in there, and it works on paper anyway. So, I would say that my objective in considering that would be to just look at it. I know we can't deem them the same thing as the other type of facilities, but essentially if we're putting multiple ones in one facility, there's an impact of smell, there's an impact of a lot of different things that they might operate and be considered in the same way we might consider someone else, a bigger facility.
Right, so that's 3 times 72 is what? 200 and some plants. So we're not talking even a micro business or a Class C license, which is like 500 plants. This is significantly lower than the lowest grow facility, maybe by half.
And you said they can't consume on that site.
You cannot consume, you cannot distribute. So letter G,
This is
under
no
4,
factor.
says
You're thinking just the
distribution.
plant growing? I'm sorry, Jill, I didn't interrupt you.
Well, and I was being
Asking
very
about the smell
generic.
factor.
Yeah, but the smell of the grow or what,
Right, and we've said on-
or the light impact, or
Right.
just
And so we tried to
environmental
address
impacts in
those
general.
things specifically. So like for odor, we've said under letter F, best practices for removal of odor so that odor from the operation is not discernible outside of the primary caregiver facility. And then we talk about the methods. They'll come to you for review, site plan review, and they will discuss the different techniques they are using to make sure that they're addressing odor control. We've said like the ozone generators can't be permitted because now we don't want to try to offset, and we're not going to smell bad, but it's going to be really noisy. So we're trying to limit that as well, that impact. In addition to addressing signage, also addressing some of the appearance, not having security bars on the windows, not doing things to make it look like it's a dangerous or scary place, making it fit in with the other buildings and establishments that are nearby.
Can I make, I hope I don't jump too many things, I just am going off my notes. Some of the most organized ones that I did see also they seem to do really, really well at giving different city offices or different city people the opportunity to come in and inspect. So a lot of them would have, well, the fire chief is going to come in and do a yearly inspection on this, and then the zoning is going to do so they kind of broke it up into all these different pieces,
Right.
and having the city engineering come in. And I know that it said that we were able to come in and inspect, but they held them to a yearly standard of inspection. Is that something that you guys have written in the code before or found useful in writing that into an ordinance?
Well, we have a requirement that it says that the facility should be available for inspection upon request by the zoning administrator, building official, fire official, or law enforcement official during reasonable business hours. I don't know that from a practice standpoint, that doesn't mean that it will be, might or may not be annual, but this gives us the ability to go in any time and do that.
Yeah, it just seems like if it was built into like a way of operation and a way of approving a site plan? Oh, did they go and meet with the city engineering? Did they go and meet with the
Well,
water
they have to
department?
do that. They have to have site plan review, and that's all part of the regular site plan review process that everybody would be required to adhere to, as well as getting permits for electrical, heating and cooling, everything else, mechanical, all that stuff.
So we could make that a note in our procedures when we come to site plan review, that we could talk to our major departments in the city. When you do a site plan review, you could say, and this is contingent on an expected annual,
Yeah, inspection, I think that's a good idea.
And they impose a fee on those inspections too.
Sure.
It's like, well, we don't want to make the city do all this extra work without,
Yeah, and
being
that's
able
not
to
something
afford
we have to
them.
put in the zoning ordinance, but that's definitely something we can handle from an administrative standpoint when we go through the applications for those.
Okay, well, I saw it in a lot of different ordinances, and I don't know.
It can be zoning, or it could be licensing ordinances as well.
It was in the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
In one other thing, I don't know if this is something that is already done through the state of Michigan, but when deciphering out all the different things that need to come together in order for these to work, one of them was the police department and running background checks and on the facility, who's running the facility and who might own the facility. There's a background check and a process to that as well. Is that something that can be built into part of that clerical system as well?
I don't know that we are allowed to do that for primary caregivers. I can check, but I know that is part of the application well, I don't even know if it's application process at the state. If it's primary caregivers, I don't know. They just register. It's different than a license that you would get for a grow facility or processor or dispensary. Those are licenses that you apply for, and there are procedures for that. The primary caregivers are registering with the state. It's a different,
Well, maybe I'll find
And
this.
that was in the ordinance that said that part of the restriction is that they had to provide those particular
yes,
state documents.
yes.
So that's good.
Compliance with state laws and rules,
Does that mean a background check, though?
whatever is required by the state for that.
But is it
State would
that,
have already done that when they give a
do they
primary
do that?
caregiver.
They do?
We don't know what they do, but it's
I don't know
probably
that
not
that's
in our-
required for the primary caregiver, but I
Yeah.
can double check that.
Okay. And then the city water department would be addressing the waste disposal and how, so there's many, from what I could understand, there's many different plans that are gonna be seen, right? There'll be a plan for a business plan, there'll be a plan for a site, where they're gonna have the layout of the building. This is just my general, not necessarily from what you're proposing, but from what I understood from reading lots of different ones. A plan to address lighting, smell, water waste, those things. So those would fall into, I didn't see how it was laid out in here, who was gonna be addressing those extra responsibilities. And I wasn't sure if that's something, like when we handle that process of assigning those different responsibilities.
That'll all come through site plan review. And all the departments that review all the site plans that come through will be reviewing them at that time as well. And that's part of what is, these are all the standards that are associated with the use. And so that's all part of the site plan review process, and that's laid out in here.
I would think that we, as the planning commission, could request that the planners and the city attorney and the city departments come up with a form/checklist for the planning commission to make certain that if we ever had to go through a particular site plan review of that characteristic, that the criteria would be laid down, just like a lot of other things, but we could put it in as a planning commission procedural document that we have, and then when it comes up, all of a sudden, there's gonna be a site plan review for primary care. Then when the planner does it, they would come out and say, okay, planning commission, here's your checklist, here's the bullet points that we've already identified.
Right, and
So
here's all the
a lot of
departments that
those
have signed
things
off.
we could add into our procedures and not necessarily, because if you put them in the zoning ordinance, then every time we want to make a change, we got to go through an official
Exactly.
process. But if we put the general requirements in the zoning ordinance, I believe we can set procedures
Yes,
that would allow us to be independently adjusting those procedures based upon what we decide as a planning commission to do.
absolutely.
So-
That would be an application specifically for this type of use that would include
Yes.
a place for the applicant to indicate how they're complying with all the standards that we've asked for.
Yeah, that would be great. So
And-
I think to address a lot of your issues, we ought to just say, if we get past the public hearing and if we decide to send the ordinance to the city council, that we also at the same time say, oh, by the way, if we do this, we need this draft of this checklist or directional
Yeah, I was gonna say,
thing.
maybe it would be helpful if we sent the application along to council when we're ready to do that. So they would
And
have,
maybe
they
we've
would
got
be able to see
maybe
it
we've
too.
got a draft
Yeah.
of that to put with council.
Sure.
That says
I think
these are
it's a
the
good
things.
idea.
And maybe we ought to do that before we have a public hearing.
Well, and I'd be happy to dig through the ones I went through and try to find kind of we don't need to reinvent wheels, right? Like, I can try to find how it was kind of laid out there as well, Jill, and send that to you as
Okay.
well, in terms of, it was very organized in how they broke it down into the departments, and I think that in terms of working from a city, like you said, the planning commission, it'd be very helpful to have that all in front, just like we do with did they meet with the engineering department? What did the engineering department say? It'd be very helpful to see that they've met those criteria, so it's a very easy process for us, and everybody's delegated in terms of what they're responsible for in the city.
And it would be really good to prevent us to being taken to court as an objection to what we did. If we go.
Right. And that way you're the
blah, here's our
same for
process,
everybody.
here's what we asked, and we went through all these things, and they didn't do this, they didn't do that, they didn't do that, therefore, we rejected their application.
Right.
Well, and I was shocked by how many different little plans they had to have, like a plan for security, a plan for this, a plan for that, and I'm like, whoa. But really, all those things are very much important, and if they're not delegated to certain aspects and offices of the city, then it seems like they would just fall by the wayside a little bit, and if there is a yearly process, which I think is important to the integrity, especially when we speak about what can happen to homes and why we're trying to move them into a more commercial type zoning. If we're trying to uphold integrity and we're trying to uphold a standard, I think that a yearly inspection's kind of important to do, and I don't know where we are on that, or if you've talked to Rennes, or if
Sure.
that's a common thing, or what everybody else thinks about that. I don't know.
So instead of making a motion to put this on the agenda for a public hearing, do we have the time? Or is there something that we can use as a baseline to establish this process? So
Do you
that
feel
when all
that-
the questions come in from the public hearing, that we can say, well, we've already begun this draft?
I think so. I think we could do, you would set the public hearing for the October meeting because we wouldn't have time to notice for the next meeting. So if you set it for October 12th, October 12th, then at the next meeting on the 28th, we could bring you the application. And then also the additional annual inspection, which I kind of think maybe we add annual inspection, but then also we can come in at any time. So kind of like add it in as an extra. Like, we're
Those were
still gonna
both-
come
sure.
in
Those were both on
whenever
there.
we think
During
that we
business
should.
hours.
During business hours, but also annually.
To that point, I know that we're not letting, I mean, essentially, nobody's supposed to be coming there, but
Right.
in terms of lighting and things like that, I did see some that said hours of operation, so like when it's being tended to, they still wanted hours of operation between like 9 and 9. You know,
Is that something that you feel like you need for someone who's growing, where they may only have a couple people working there?
I don't know. I mean, I guess it's something I wanted to kind of discuss in terms of like if people are concerned about maybe suspicious activities where, you know, if you drive down BRD2 right now and you see a car or something happening there, it might flag some type of police presence or, you know what because they're out of the standard zoning for that area operational hours, right? So I didn't know if that was something.
There may be people in those districts, BRD2 and I1, depending
That's
on
true.
what kind of
Warehouse
operation it
type
is,
hours.
they may have late hours.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else has any ideas on that. Hours of operation or... No.
We'll put it as a question, and then
Okay.
we'll figure out whether or not
All
it
right.
is, I would think that if there was a response at our public hearing, and there was a lot of question about hours of operation, that we would say, well, that's something that our city residents want.
Yeah.
So then we could incorporate it. If it's not, and we feel that it's just better to be on the nuisance side of it, then we could go in that direction too, either way.
All right, is there any other?
Does that give you enough time?
Oh, yeah.
Good.
And we don't have to motion, administration will take care of it for us. They'll set up the public hearing and everything else, tell us when we can do that.
Set the public hearing for October 12th?
Yeah.
So do we need to make a motion
I don't
to
believe-
recommend
I
that
think-
we,
I think we.
that they establish a public hearing?
Can I ask one more question before we go too
I don't think
far
you need a motion for that.
We usually get a motion to
We
set a
usually
public
get a
hearing.
motion.
Want to make a motion?
Greg, can I ask one more question real quick?
Sure.
Sneak it in there. Accessory buildings, I did notice that some did define accessory type facilities. Is that something, I'm just throwing it out there, we don't have to discuss and decide, but is that something we might, especially since I know we've talked about accessory dwellings,
Well, they
that's more
can't-
residential, I
Yeah,
know.
you can't
but-
live there.
Huh?
I said we don't allow that.
In residential, right, but it's something that I know that we've kind of thrown around a few times, and I have seen it present in other ordinances in terms of, operational things, so can you just jot that down as a note, maybe? If
Well,
we
do
want to
say
discuss accessory
all-
dwellings.
Under secure facilities, all medical cannabis shall be contained within the main building in an enclosed locked facility and accessible on all sides, including top and bottom, and equipped with locks or other security devices that permit access only by the registered primary caregiver or qualifying patient. I don't know what, they might have an accessory building, but they couldn't keep anything in it.
Okay,
That's not, I mean, they could keep
A lawnmower.
watering cans and a lawnmower and extra light bulbs and things like that. I don't know that we would necessarily want to limit that. You can think about it.
okay, I just wanted to put it out.
You just said something. If there's no distribution,
I saw that too.
Why could
As
the
soon as
paint-
I said it, I was like, well, that doesn't sound right.
no, it's only by the registered primary
Right.
caregivers.
Yep.
Or
That's it.
their
Or,
employees, or
Um,
not?
No, it's only
Says
supposed to be
only
one
by the
caregiver
registered
per
caregiver.
patient, right? And also, I did notice in some other ones, again, I hate to just keep pointing out all these crazy things, but there's a reason why things are usually written into these things, okay? They also pointed out that within the building, there's not supposed to be other businesses operating. And I don't know if that's a point of clarification we need to make now, or that's something we need to do down the time. But I did see that pop up a few times in terms of the building itself.
Yeah, I think we talked about that. And we ended up, I think, not restricting it from that. Again, there's not a lot of area that's included in this.
If you had a large building, say, on Rochester Road, and that building could have 3 facilities, it might have room for 6 businesses, and the other 3 might be whatever would be available to be done in that footage in an I-1 district, so.
Right, and that's why we did the odor control is beyond the premise, the facility itself. So it shouldn't intrude on the accountant that's next door that doesn't have anything to do with it.
Yes.
So it would allow for both, and try to respect that impact, but not limit it to its own standalone building.
Okay.
You want to make a motion then to move it on, have administration move it on to a public meeting?
Are you ready? You gonna do this?
Am I making the motion?
Why not?
Well, I didn't know, I was just. I'll make a motion to, I don't even know what number we're on, to move the caregiver to public hearing, October
12th,
12th. Oh,
I think.
it's my birthday.
Direct administration to take care of that for us.
Yeah.
Is that enough?
That's good enough motion. You got a second?
Yeah.
I'll second it.
Okay.
I'd like to add, if it's okay, with the understanding that at the September, or whatever it is, meeting, we'll have a draft of the application / planning review process to be available to us so that we can have that when the planning commission has a public hearing.
Will you add that to your motion?
Oh, yes, do I have to say the whole thing again?
No, you just
I acknowledge that, yes.
accept his addition.
I accept
and,
that.
I got it.
And you'll second the thing with changes?
I'll second the changes.
We have a motion, we have second. No further comment, roll call, please.
Mr. Sinaki?
Yes.
Mr. Watson?
Yes?
Mr. Fitzer?
Yes.
Mr. Cusero?
Yes.
Mr. Pernick?
Yes.
And Ms. Redmond?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Good. Agenda item number 8, planners report.
I don't think I have anything else to add
Nothing
tonight.
there?
Except to
Staff
remind you that there is a joint meeting with the Planning Commission and City Council on Monday,
Yes.
September 27th. Here.
I've seen that posted.
Yes,
who,
we're
what?
going to do a hands-on capital improvement plan workshop.
It's at 6:30.
Thank you.
6:30, right? I thought? Yeah.
Yes.
It might, yeah, thanks, Joan. I don't have it with me.
Are you aware of anything else coming in front of us? I got the report here on the status on the ongoing development projects, listing all these things.
Joan's still here.
449, West 14 Mile. It says a new architect has been retained for site plan application. They have to come in front of us for site plan, I believe. Are you?
Correct.
Yeah.
Is there any timing on that, or are they operating under a certificate of occupancy or a temporary certificate of occupancy? How are they running business, are they?
They don't have a temporary C of O. They were open prior to before they started the work on the facade. They were open. They did not have. There was not a site plan to stop. They worked on the facade and were told that they could finish the facade. And then there was a lawsuit. The settlement says they have to come before planning commission with site plan for the facade and the parking lot. And they have a new architect who understands that and will be drafting that.
I'm sorry, who are you talking about?
449 Little City Plaza,
It's where.
449 West 14
Or
Mile.
what it was?
Hungry Howie's and that.
Got it. Okay.
It was bought and they did all the EFS
Yep,
on the
they started
service of it.
Yep, I do remember. Just wasn't sure what you were talking about.
Okay, I'd just like to keep up on the speed on that one so we don't lose another one by the way here.
Oh, no, again, they have a new architect, and I've been talking with him, he understands what he has to do. Their former architect was in denial.
Okay.
We are anticipating site plans for 639 North Rochester and for 516 North Main coming in soon. We did receive one for 1100 North Crooks, so that'll be coming to you. And other than that, I think everything is in your report. That was, the stats and everything were given to you.
Yeah, good. Thank you. Seeing no attorney, I don't think we're going to have a legal update tonight. If anyone has anything else to say, now's the time to say it or make a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Support?
I have a motion, I have support. Roll call, please.
Mr. Fetzer?
Yes.
Mr. Cusero?
Yes.
Mr. Pernick?
Yes.
Ms. Redmond?
Yes.
Mr. Sinaki?
Yes.
Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.